Welcome to Dark Echoes, where the shadows come alive and every story whispers a nightmare. If you're ready to face your deepest fears, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what's lurking next. Like, share, and dive into the darkness with us, if you dare. James Calloway had always been known as a man who could handle anything. A seasoned hunter, his reputation in the small town was built on years of experience. Tracking, hunting, and surviving even the harshest wilderness. He had been on countless expeditions, faced down dangerous animals, and had the scars to prove it. But none of it prepared him for what he would encounter on that fateful day in the forest. It started as a simple trip, a weekend hunt with his closest friends, men he had known for years, each with their own wealth of knowledge. Together, they would venture deep into the heart of the forest, ready to track down whatever elusive prey awaited. They laughed and joked as they made their way in, unaware that the very ground beneath their boots was already whispering of something far darker. James could feel it at the back of his mind, that strange feeling, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. It wasn't the forest he knew. No, this was different. As the wind shifted and the trees groaned, something felt off. But James, ever the confident hunter, shook it off. They were experts. Nothing could touch them. But then, the first scream cut through the silence. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the sound of a wolf or a bear. It was human. As the panic began to spread, James found himself faced with the impossible. A creature, lurking in the shadows, one that defied logic, strength, and everything he thought he knew about survival. A creature whose very existence seemed to mock everything they stood for as hunters. And in that moment, James understood. The hunters had become the hunted. In this story, the tables are turned, and we follow James and his friends as they fight for their lives against a savage beast no one could have foreseen. The dense wilderness of the Pacific Northwest was a place that few dared to venture. A labyrinth of towering pines and thick underbrush stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was heavy with the scent of moss and damp earth, a stark contrast to the dry, unrelenting sun of the open world. The forest seemed to breathe, its shadows long and shifting with each passing gust of wind. Here, in the heart of this wild, untouched land, the group of hunters entered with their usual confidence, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. As they trekked deeper into the woods, the sounds of the outside world faded. The air grew thicker, muffled by the weight of the trees. The only noise now the crunch of boots on leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. The wind whispered through the branches, sending a chill down their spines, while the distant cry of an owl echoed through the night, an eerie reminder that they were not alone. But for all its beauty, the forest held a darkness within it that they could never have imagined. In this silence, the hunters felt at ease, each of them seasoned professionals, their senses sharp from years of tracking and survival. They were hunters, skilled in their craft, and nothing in the woods could threaten them. Not a bear, not a wolf, not even the most cunning of mountain lions. They were experts, or so they thought. There was James Calloway, the leader of the group, a man in his early 40s with a face worn by years of wilderness expeditions. He had tracked everything from elk to cougars, and his hands were steady as he gripped his rifle, always calm under pressure. James was the type of man who thrived in the wild, someone who could read the forest as easily as he could read a map. He was the one everyone turned to for guidance, and he believed the forest was just another challenge to conquer. Then there was Daniel Hughes, a younger man in his late 20s, eager and ambitious. Daniel had joined James on countless hunts, but his hunger for adventure was matched only by his tendency to rush into situations without fully thinking them through. Still, his instincts were sharp, and he was a solid tracker, a quick learner who admired James' expertise, yet often found himself questioning the wisdom of waiting when the thrill of the chase beckoned. Next was Michael Donovan, the quiet one of the group, a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always with a sense of finality. Michael had seen too much to be fazed by anything. A Vietnam War veteran, his calm under pressure came from experiences no one else in the group could comprehend. His rifle was always ready, but his mind was even sharper, picking up details others might miss. Michael had a reputation for being cold, but he was fiercely loyal and respected by all who knew him. Finally, there was Thomas "Tommy" Ward, the joker of the group, In his mid-30s, Tommy's hearty laugh and unshakable optimism often lightened the mood in the most dire of situations. A skilled hunter in his own right, Tommy never took life too seriously, but beneath his easygoing demeanor, there was a fierce determination, a drive to succeed that came from a history of failed attempts to prove himself. His joke-filled banter was what kept the group grounded, but it also often hid his deep insecurities. Together, they made a formidable team. They had been through countless hunts, conquered the wild, and returned with their spoils each time, their confidence growing with each successful venture. But this time, in the eerie silence of this forgotten corner of the world, something felt off. The forest seemed to breathe, watching them, waiting. None of them could have known that the very ground they walked on was not just home to wildlife. It was the territory of a predator so ancient, so elusive, that it had slipped beneath the radar of even the most seasoned hunters. A predator that did not abide by the rules they had come to rely on. This wasn't a wolf, or a bear, or even a mountain lion. This was something else. And as they ventured further into the woods, unaware of what lurked just beyond the trees, the winds began to pick up, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a growl, distant but unmistakable. At first, they ignored it, a trick of the wind, perhaps. But as the minutes stretched into hours and the hunt took them deeper into the forest, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest was no longer just a place of adventure. It was a ticking time bomb, each step bringing them closer to something they would never be able to outrun. It wasn't long before the first scream shattered the stillness. A sharp, blood-curdling cry, one that didn't belong in the wild. And in that moment, the hunters realized their prey had become them. As the group ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew thicker, charged with a subtle unease. The wind had stilled, and the usual sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, seemed to vanish into an unnatural silence. Thomas Ward was the first to notice something was off. He stopped suddenly, his eyes narrowing as he crouched beside the underbrush. A faint, metallic scent filled the air, strange and foreign to the woods. He bent lower, his fingers brushing against the ground, and there it was, a trail of dark, dried blood leading into the thick trees. No sign of a carcass, no animal tracks, he muttered, his gut telling him to turn back. But the thrill of the hunt was still too strong to ignore. The others dismissed it, brushing it off as the work of a wounded animal. But the unease lingered, growing with every step they took. The wind picked up again, but now it carried with it an almost haunting growl, low, rumbling, but too close. Their instincts told them they weren't alone. As the hours passed, the men grew increasingly tense, each one hearing things that weren't there. A branch snapping, a distant howl. Yet when they looked, there was nothing. James Calloway tried to keep the group calm, but even his steady demeanor faltered when a low, guttural noise echoed through the trees, close enough to raise the hairs on the back of his neck. The forest had changed. It was no longer just a place of adventure. It had become a predator's domain. Daniel's voice trembled as he whispered, "It's watching us." The group was divided now. Some wanted to push forward, convinced it was just their nerves, while others felt the primal pull of fear. The tension between them was palpable, but none of them could deny it. They were being hunted. What had started as a routine hunt was now a desperate fight for survival, and the realization settled in. The tables had turned. They weren't tracking prey. They were the prey. The group, now on edge, decided to split up briefly to cover more ground. It was a tactic they had used countless times before, but this time it felt wrong. James, Daniel, and Michael moved off in one direction, while Tommy stayed back to keep watch at the camp. Minutes passed in tense silence, the forest now feeling suffocating. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the trees, followed by a piercing scream, Tommy's scream. It was abruptly cut off, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the rustling of the forest. The hunters rushed to the source of the noise, heartbeats pounding in their ears. When they reached the clearing, they found it. Tommy's lifeless body, blood staining the ground in a way that didn't seem possible. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly into the sky, terror frozen on his face. But it wasn't the blood or his death that sent a chill down their spines. It was the way his body had been left, torn, shredded, as though something had dragged him through the underbrush, using him as bait. Then the growl came. It was low at first, a guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate the very earth beneath their feet. It was closer than they had realized. The hunters slowly turned, their rifles at the ready, but the trees gave no answers. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, locked onto them from the shadows, too bright, too unnatural to be from any animal they knew. In a blur of motion, the creature lunged, faster than they could react. Its form was a nightmare, a blur of muscle and darkness, and it moved with a speed they couldn't comprehend. The sound it made was like the roar of thunder, a primal, bone-shaking noise that filled the air, freezing them in place. The hunters stood paralyzed, unable to move, their fear overwhelming their instincts. This wasn't an animal. This was something far worse. As the hunters regrouped, their breath heavy in their chests, the true horror began to sink in. What had attacked them was no bear, no mountain lion, but something else entirely. Something far beyond their comprehension. The beast's strength was impossible, its speed unimaginable. It moved like a shadow, vanishing in and out of the trees before they could even react. James felt his heart race as his mind struggled to make sense of what they were facing. This can't be real, Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. What the hell are we dealing with? They tried to convince themselves it was just another wild animal, but deep down, they all knew the truth. The creature wasn't hunting like any animal they knew. It was hunting like something intelligent, something driven by more than hunger. Each failed attempt to fight back only made their situation worse. The creature was relentless. No matter how hard they fought, how many traps they set, it found a way to tear through them. Michael was the next to fall. He'd spotted movement near a ridge and had given chase, but when the beast turned on him, it was over before he could lift his rifle. One moment, he was calling out to the others. The next, he was dragged into the trees. His scream echoed briefly, but it was quickly swallowed by the forest. James and Daniel pushed forward, desperation driving them. They set a barricade, hoping to trap the creature, but the beast was always one step ahead. Daniel caught a glimpse of it. A hulking silhouette moving with unnatural grace, its eyes burning through the shadows. But before he could fire, the beast lunged. In one swift motion, it struck, sending Daniel crashing to the ground. His rifle slipped from his hand as the creature's claws sank into his flesh, the terror in his eyes still fresh as he died. Now, only James remained. The hunt had turned. The hunters were no longer the ones in control. They were prey, hunted by a force they couldn't even begin to understand. With each life taken, the creature's skill in killing grew more terrifying, its presence more suffocating. James was running out of options, out of time, and out of breath. The tables had turned, and James knew the fight for survival had only just begun. James stumbled to the forest, his body battered, his mind barely holding together. His friends were gone, their screams still echoing in his ears. Every step felt heavier, every breath shallower. The beast was close now. He could feel it, hear its heavy breath behind him. With no way to escape, and no way to fight back, James turned to face the creature. It stepped into the clearing, its glowing eyes locked onto him, its massive form almost too monstrous to comprehend. The final moment had arrived. Would James survive, or would the beast claim him as it had claimed the others? The air was thick with fear as the creature loomed closer, its growl vibrating through the ground. James raised his rifle one last time, but it was hopeless. The beast was too fast, too powerful. His heart pounded, his fingers trembling. But just as the creature leapt, something strange happened. Was it truly a supernatural force, or something else entirely? The locals had whispered for years about terrifying sounds in these woods. No one knew what made them. Could this creature be something from those dark legends, or was it something far worse? What's truly out there in the wild? Stay tuned to find out in our next video, where we uncover the dark legends that haunt these woods. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Could you survive a hunt like this one? Or would the terror of the wilderness consume you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more chilling stories like this one, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notifications, so you never miss a haunting tale. We've got more spine-tingling stories coming your way, so stay tuned. If you dare,